Okay, so we are live. Thank you, as always, for my guest joining me. So I was actually thinking, I don't think I've actually said it. Is it Claudia or Claudia? Because in English,
Both are fine. Both are fine.
okay,
English people tend to say Claudia,
okay, yeah,
but since I am based in Luxembourg, I hear all variations of it. So I'm fine either way, whatever is comfortable calling.
fantastic. So we'll get into a bit of background between you and I because yeah, I'll cover that off in a second. But for the people that don't know you yet, hopefully they'll get to know you a lot better because we've had a lot of conversations and yeah, you're one of my favorite people to talk to. But just
Thank you.
a little bit of context of who you are, what you do, for everybody listening.
Yes, thank you. Well, I am Claudia Cimenti. I am based in Luxembourg, as you are. And I have a coaching and mediation practice called Top Coach Luxembourg. So essentially, I'm a freelancer and I do help private and corporate clients. Those are very often top leaders in their organizations. And I come and do conflict resolution practices with them, but also, of course, mindset coaching. That's my main gig is mindset coaching. Sometimes, if I'm in agreement with the leader, I actually go a little bit beyond the pure coaching and step into a thinking partner role. So an executive thinking partner, somebody who really bounces ideas forth and back, and it maybe takes a little bit more of an active role in the whole thinking process. Some leaders really, really like that and enjoy that extra little bit of openness or challenge, depending on what the situation calls for. But again, this is by verbal contracting, of course, and with permission. Otherwise, I am a coach, team coach, and mediator.
Nice, good. So yeah, I mean, I don't know how long we've been speaking, but as I said, you're one of my favorite people to speak to. So we try and keep these conversations to an hour, but I know your conversation with me often rolls on for quite some time.
Quite some time, hours.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And it's just I think because of your experience, and I know you're well traveled as well. You're in Luxembourg now, but I want to say you were in Canada, but I don't know Canada. I know US for sure, right?
Yeah. I'm dating myself here, but when I was studying, there was no university in Luxembourg yet. Now there's vibrant university here, but when I was about to study, you had to go abroad, and I studied in France. I did École préparatoire in Lyon, in France, where I met my current husband, who was an exchange student from the US, which then led me to finish my studies in the US at the same university that he was at. So I spent 20 years in the end in the Boston area, but my work back then also brought me a lot up and down the East Coast and specifically into Eastern Canada. So I was stationed a lot in Ottawa and Toronto, doing high-tech consulting and high-tech sales.
Yeah. So you're one of those people that when I speak to, every time there's a new piece of gold, I'm like, how did I not know that about you? And the last conversation we had was about how much you traveled, and you gave me this tip, which I went to a hotel recently, and you said when you're traveling a lot, you just take everything that's sitting on the side, like pens and anything like that, and you put your stuff there. You clear it completely off, and you put your stuff there because you may be living out of a bag, but you put it on the side and you know exactly what you've got and then what you take.
Yeah.
And
It's to reduce this visual clutter, right? Because
yeah,
there's so much hotel stuff on the surfaces that later on you have to like check, is this theirs? Is this mine? So in the beginning, I go into the hotel, I gather up all the nooks, and, all the stuff from everywhere, and just put it on a shelf in the cabinet, and it's still there. It's for them to replace back onto their surfaces. But I know at least later if something's out, it's mine. So a
Yeah.
little tip for everybody.
But it's stuff like that that just really helps me. And again, I did it the other day, and I was like, because it's so easy. You take something out and you're mixing it with the hotel things, their books or whatever. And I was like, yeah, it's genius. So I that's one of the many reasons I like our conversations. There's always some golden nugget of information, and yeah, I really do love it. So I'm also going to pay you a really big compliment, because in our last conversation, we were just catching up, and we started this conversation, which is the topic of this live, around coaching in athletics and sports versus in companies and business. Now, that led me to basically write a series of posts on LinkedIn. So I post daily, and there was a lot of feedback from that, a lot from coaches, and they were like, "Yeah, this is really something. Companies need to understand the importance of it." And I would say it was a series of posts that probably got most of the feedback, because I think as a coach out there, you can really see you can do some good, but there's maybe this resistance from a business perspective. So the compliment really is, thank you for sparking, the idea and, for this conversation, but also the engagement I started having from other people, other coaches on LinkedIn. So very grateful for that.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, it's something that I think a lot of people, or most people, are familiar with sports, and nobody would see a sports team without their coach. Nobody would see even people like athletes at the top of their game without a coach. Can you imagine? And I'm dating myself again here, but Tiger Woods, at the top of his golf game, without a coach, it's inconceivable. And this guy knows everything about everything regarding golf. Obviously, he's really, really good. But yet he had a multitude of coaches lending that external eye and coaching him through blind spots and helping him improve even the slightest bit. And I think that, it's just so much part of the deal of being a really good athlete. You're not going to be an athlete at any kind of top level without a coach, period. And yet in leadership, it's this remedial thing. It's a coach is something you get when something is wrong with you, and sometimes it's even inflicted like a punishment. And it's not to get you, if people get one thing out of today, I would say it's not to get you from less than to normal. No, it's to get you from great to better to extraordinary. That's what a coach helps you to do. It's to excel, to push your boundaries, to become that much better, to release new potential that you have. And it's tough to do this on your own. Yeah. And by the way, we're talking here about business leaders, but just to open it up, everybody should have a coach. I mean, even Bill Gates, his quote, "Everybody needs a coach," is out there. And I have a coach. Yeah, people should have coaches, because we can't help ourselves, just like a doctor can't really help themselves and needs to go to another doctor. So yes, there's a lot of potential that's being left on the table, because corporate still doesn't get this longer term potential increasing sense of coaching, but see it as a cost or something remedial.
Yeah. So I mean, I gave a lot of thought to this, and what is the association you think that companies or corporates have? And again, you kind of hit on it. Normally coaches are called in when there's a problem, and my head then says crisis. It's crisis management and stuff like that. Crisis. But why do you think this exists? So, like, if I'm just to frame it, in the sports world, athletics, anything like that, it's very visible that there are coaches. They are celebrated. Many televised sports, you will see, a segment of that moment, they'll say, look, this is the coach. If it's in football, they'll show you the coach. Often it's more than one. They're doing different things, and they're joining together to help. I'm thinking about tennis. Wimbledon was recently. You'd see the coaches. They're always, they're not taking the spotlight necessarily. They're not they're, because obviously I think in athletics you become quite a celebrity in a way. But they're there, they're visible, they're not shying away. And it's really, and everyone just accepts it. And then because when you told me this, and I was like, yeah, this is so obvious. Why don't we think about it? But then you look at the business world, and it's like, no, it's almost like a shame that there's some coaching that we're not good enough. Like, we need a coach. And it's existed for ages, but why do you think this has come about?
I think that there's a number of points to it where we could start thinking about this. The first one is, like you mentioned already, it's being in a crisis-driven culture, meaning we are only going to invest if we're in a crisis. It's kind of this reactive kind of performance model. If we fall behind, we are going to do something instead of this really proactive, and we're taking a longer time view, and we're going to see, where this leads us and so on. So it's this, I think, very often problem triggered, performance triggered kind of thing that spurs action instead of this more strategic kind of thing of moving towards something longer term and investing a little bit. I think that's one point. The other one really is this myth that it's a stigma of weakness. There's the stigma of weakness. It's so many executives still think that coaching is admitting inadequacy, that coaching signals that you have a problem, versus athletes see it as, well, it's the necessary thing that is going to unleash my potential and let me reach for this peak performance. I think that in general, also, I think coaching, true transformative coaching, takes time. When I engage with top leaders, we're talking months of obviously not daily meetings, but weekly or bi-weekly meetings over 6 months or longer, in order to not only have, let's say, a mental breakthrough, this aha moment, but also this, how are we now going to implement this? How is this going to look in practice? How do we adjust? How do we make this work? It takes time. It's a longer term thing, which contradicts the results focused short-termism of modern business. This thing about investing in something where the ROI is only going to be visible in 6 months or a year. Right? Or when this leader takes the next promotion, that's when we're going to see the trade-off, right? So the gradual, systematic kind of change. And so I think one more thing, which is so weird to me, and maybe you can relate, is I don't have time for that. Leaders saying, I do not have time for coaching. Which to me is akin, I cannot take half an hour a week to think about myself and my performance and my plans and my alignment and what I'm after and my strategy. It's meaning I do not have time to think.
Yeah.
If you say I don't have time to be coached, you say I don't have time to think and reflect and better myself. So I think that those might be some points that play into that. What do you think?
Yeah, so there's again, you say so much stuff that I can sort of feed off, but I think so. I'll say the thing that sort of was popping up prior to what you were saying. So how I basically build my network is I reach out to a lot of people and I ask them 2 questions. The second of those questions is, what is not talked about enough on LinkedIn? And the type of people that I'm reaching out to are sort of founders and leaders. And there's this oftentimes they say about it's not talked about resilience, what you need at that top level to keep going, to manage all of those things. Um, you know, everything, you've got a million decisions, you've got problems maybe at home, you've got to worry about the treasury, the finance, people's holidays, people's problems, etc. And that variations of that same subject comes back time and time again, and it's not talking about it. And I was like, yeah, because I think, like you sort of mentioned earlier, there is this sort of myth at the top that you don't need help, and that you've been put on a pedestal. You're let's say, a CEO of a company. Okay, you must have all of the answers.
Mm-hmm.
And how is that even possible? Like, I don't know, because they've, unless so let's say I found a company, and I just start that, and so I have founded this company, but I work as a solopreneur. But then say you start, having people, you take on more work or whatever, and you grow. There's nothing in me that says I'm great at leading other people. So then, but then I can see very much like the ego comes in, and you go, oh, I'm the top of this company, I founded it, I'm great. And then it almost feels that, having someone else come in and say, oh, look, I could help you with this, is almost like a trying to reduce your ego in some way. So I know I've gone off in a tangent, but I think between all of that, there is this big myth that, we can do it all, or this, we don't need help, and we'll just find our way ourselves without coaching. That's what I've seen so far.
Mm-hmm. Right. I really think that it's lonely at the top is a reality, and very often it's a self-imposed reality. But if you a key decision maker in an organization, and you have to be this one fixed point that holds it all together, sometimes it may very well appear counterproductive to say, I don't know. How can people trust you to take decisions that are strategic for, the whole of the organization, if, you admit that you don't necessarily have all the facets exactly ironed out? And so it takes the right mix of even thinking about it, ultimately, yes, I'm going to make the decision, but I will need to rely on this whole organization that's essentially my resource, in order to provide me with the information that I need in order to make the good decision. But a lot of leaders don't think that way. They think, okay, I have to just do it all exactly by myself, and don't necessarily see their leadership board, the board, or the leadership team, as a resource they can very easily tap. And sometimes it's just a mindset shift of which perspective you bring to these things that can really help you step out of this constriction. But it's a real challenge. I really think that it doesn't come easy, right?
Yeah. So just, going back to the thing you actually asked me when I went off in a tangent, but I think, there are a lot of people that just say, oh, I'm so busy. My reaction to that is that's avoidance rather than anything else. Because so I heard this saying, and it's not necessarily the right thing, but people will say about meditation. So I'm quite into meditation. I do my own style of it, but people say I don't have 10 minutes to meditate. And basically the answer is, if you haven't got 10 minutes, you should give it an hour, because you really need to. Because again, if you're that into the work, you're not stepping away, you're too close to every single thing, or you're too in it. And I mean, one of the great things I can see about coaching and, helping, is often they're external. I've never really come across an internal coaching team. I've seen internal training or development team, but that's not necessarily, that's more about organizing training than anything else.
Mm-hmm.
And what I see, and I've experienced it myself when I've gone to a company as a consultant, coming with a fresh pair of eyes, coming with no preconceived idea of how things are, and also coming with a wealth of experience in other places. And certainly as a consultant, you've probably been to many different organizations. They all maybe do something different. There's probably a heavy overlap, but you can bring that wealth of knowledge, and because you're not in the day to day. So like you mentioned in terms of your service, you're not there every single moment of every day. So you're not caught up in the day to day stuff, and you have that distance that you can say, okay, like just take a step back. And I've seen this in myself. In my previous company, the way that it worked is I wouldn't go to the office. I'd go maybe a couple of times a week, and I would go there, and like there would be some very, say, like, small disagreements about just simple things, and which is normal. There was no issue with that. But then when you come in, you go, oh, okay, you've got this stuff, but actually you should be focusing here. And I think as an external person, only that's possible, because even doing my own business now, I can see you can get very into it, and being able to pull yourself away. We talk about holidays and taking vacation, just a rest from it gives you that better vantage point to maybe make changes or see things that you're caught up in that isn't actually adding value.
That being said, I think that an internal coach is still mounts better than no coach.
Yeah,
okay,
yeah, sure.
if it's somebody skilled at leading you to a space of accountability, of holding the space, of where you're kind of then forced to take a time out and really think and just reflect. If they're able to do that, that's really great and very, very much value add. So there is definitely a space for internal coaches, but you're absolutely right. Coming in as an external person, there's the whole idea of, there's a conflict of interest is gone, because as an external coach, it's one of my absolute strong things that I say, what happens in this room is confidential.
Mm-hmm.
And I am not, yes, the company pays me, but, I am here for you. And, I'm not in this conflict of interest as a permanent employee might be. Okay. Yeah. And actually, that's one of the reasons why some people come to me privately, to take this tripartite idea completely out of the equation. I can come to you privately as a coach. We can touch on private, social, professional matters. And I have much more control, and nobody else needs to be privy to this at all. So if there's even a hint of that thought in the client's head, sometimes they decide to go privately, even though from an ethics perspective, I would keep stuff private, obviously also in a corporate setting.
Yeah, that's a really interesting point of view, because someone's saying, I actually need coaching and I'm going to go outside of the company. I understand, but again, this all sort of points in my head to a point of, okay, I'm going to be seen less than, or I can't be honest and open and say, look, I need coaching on that. And I don't know if that's I wouldn't say the words like vulnerability, weakness, all these things that sort of, I don't know, maybe I've got some legacy stuff there that maybe I need to dig into. But it's really sad, because again, as you were talking, I was thinking about how it is in sports. So I don't know. I think obviously in team sports, let's take football, like UK football rather than American football. I'm sure it's pretty much the same, but you have like a manager, and then you have appointed coaches, and you have maybe more than one. And I don't know if it's, let's take tennis, for example. Do you go and pick your coach, or are you assigned it from your management team, etc.? I'm not sure, because where I'm going with this is, it's having a coach is also like having therapy. You really need to have a very good relationship, a very good trust. And you kind of mentioned that anyway, because if you don't have that as a foundation, they're not going to open up. And I think in therapy, that's essential. But also in coaching?
In coaching, it's the same. You have to, what in the coaching world is called this rapport. You have to be able to feel comfortable and trust your coach, in order to be able up, because you might very well talk about things that you have never talked about before. And you have to have that level of trust, that level of rapport, that you're in a safe space to do that, in a safe space to talk about, I don't know, deep fears or addiction issues or whatever it is that you talk about with your coach. And, if it's somebody who's just very standoffish, with whom you do not feel connected, that is going to be very tricky. I think when we come back to the sports thing, there's two parts on here. I think athletes train two things. They train skills and they train mindset, and the inner, what I refer to as the inner game. And you see it on my tagline on LinkedIn, right? That I deal with the inner game of leadership. The first one is skills. It's how do you throw a football? How do you play balls and things like that? So there's coaches for that. And actually, there's absolutely a place for leadership training, leadership skills enhancement, and even in a coaching relationship, if the coachee wants to take a little bit of this focus on finding his or her, sorry, I'm staying gender neutral here, in their thing about giving feedback. What's my style of giving feedback? When, where, how, and so on. Then we are looking a little bit at the skills. But on the other hand, we are also looking at executive presence. We are looking at communication, and so on and so on. So there's also a possibility here in what's maybe more a mindset coaching thing to also address skills, because then in sports they have these true coaches in the sense that maybe we think about coaching, which is mindset, performance, my confidence, psychological preparation. We all know that top athletes visualize, they are in this mental preparation mode and so on, which is much more of a cognitive or even emotional cognitive state that's being discussed and addressed. And I think that athletes too do a lot of work in that. Okay, so there's the true skill set, and then there's the whole, if we use one term for it, mindset work, right? The cognitive work associated with that. And so let's assume for a second that top leaders are skilled in this skilled in the craft of leadership. How to lead a team, how to give feedback, how to communicate, how to represent their team to upper management, and so on and so on. Let's say that they have, through experience or training or mentoring or whatever, gotten the skill set right. The presence and mindset and visualization and self-concept that they bring to all of that. That's really what you touch in with mostly in coaching, in mindset coaching. And I think we if we want to stay along those lines, stuff like alignment and their own private strategic goals and how they mesh with the goals of the organizations. If we talk about culture, their teams, their organizations, it's all this big mess of sometimes contradictory things, and to gain clarity about all that, clarity about the true responsibilities versus the imaginary ones, very big one on there, and so on and so on. So you see that just like an athlete needs to get clear about what they're after, clear about what it is that they're working on right now actively, clear about where they want to be in 3 months and 6 months and so on. It's the same for a top leader. because it's not just about them as well. It's about the whole company and the vision that they bring to it. So it's too sad that often leaders get neglected to the point of burnout before they get any kind of assistance.
Yes. So something was occurring to me again as you were speaking is in sports, athletics or whatever, there's a clear goal, as in, you want to get gold, silver, bronze,
Right, win the
or
championship, right?
or you want to win this league, or you want to. There's a table. I know very little about football, so, but you want to be promoted, or you want to win this, or you want to win these cups. You don't really do a lot outside. I know they have maybe different events that they might want to show up for, but golf, okay, it's very the goals are already set. Whereas I was thinking about business, they're very loose. You can go, I want to be number one in something, but I very rarely worked at a company that knows exactly what they want to do. And I've had this conversation before about values, etc. And so my mind sort of split off a little bit, because if let's say banks, I've worked in banks for a while, they all try and compete and say, oh, we're one of the big five banks or something, but there'll be in one sector, maybe custody that will look after people's assets or something, and then advisory. So they create these subcategories and all these things. So it's never very, very clear. But then I started to think again, as you were talking, and about these leaders, etc. You've got so many people, and it's like, well, what's the values of the company? What's the values of you? What's the goals? Are these actually aligned? Because then I started to think about all the people that I've worked with in companies, and some of them are amazing, but they all kind of wanted to do the thing themselves. Anyone that was going, they weren't, they might carry people into, say they left and went to another company. They would generally take some people with them. The people that they took with them, they didn't do it because of helping those people. I'm sure they did partly, but they also knew that they would be a great support system in that next company. It wasn't necessarily, and they go, yeah, we've got a great thing going, good dynamic, we're going to go. But then, there seems this switch from like a team thing into almost individualism, if that makes sense. Does that?
Well, I think that you touch on something very interesting here. First of all, your previous point, I really think there's a measurement challenge. Right, like you said, athletes want to win the gold, win the championship, and so on. I want to hit the ball that many meters, whatever it is, and the ROI is very clear. Versus and of course, if there's a coaching agreement, they ask me like, what ROI can you bring with this team? And in good coaching fashion, I say, well, it depends. Right? Because it depends on the team, it depends on everything. And right now I can't even say, because first I have to get to know the team, we have to diagnose, then we have to come up with a plan, and then maybe we can set targets that we want to shoot. There are, of course, some metrics that can be used to look at things in terms of team dynamic. There's things like that. There's but a lot of things are actually qualitative metrics. And then of course HR is like, oh my God, how am I gonna put that in the budget, right? So there's definitely how to quantify the coaching ROI. We can look at statistics in terms of survey data, research data that shows that ROI actually exists in these things, that if you have a competent coach for the leadership team members, for instance, you can expect certain things to be much clearer, much more, you get more buy-in, and so on and so on, and performance metrics can change. So, but in any case, there's not really a guarantee that you can do, as you can't in coaching. I mean, it's just impossible, because the coach does not guarantee something that is ultimately up to the coachee.
Yes.
Right. So because imagine, worst of all cases, that I end up with a deadbeat coachee, and we never build this rapport because he or she is absolutely not interested. Then I cannot guarantee that we can actually progress. I will then, with good ethics, say I might not be the right coach for this person, and or coaching might not be what this person needs right now. And then go to the company and obviously inform them, because I wouldn't continue that just to bring home a paycheck. It's impossible. So I really think that that's the case. I think that what we also do when it comes to teams, and especially once we go up and have like a leadership team, for instance, is that even though we might start a team coaching where the client ultimately is the team, and getting the team to work better together, and more in sync and more aligned in terms of purpose and mission and vision and all those good things, we also bring a lot of individual attention to the team member, to the individuals. And I think that is also something that's not necessarily understood, that just like in sports, when you have a team of players, yes, you teach them how to play well together and when to hand off the ball or when not, but you still work with each one individually on their individual mindsets, mental preparation, on their skills, and so on, so that they then can figure out the optimal way that they can contribute to this elusive thing that's the team dynamic and the team spirit, right? So that is an integral part as well. And that, of course, is very different in team coaching to as compared to, let's say, a training. You get canned information, or even a workshop, yes, where people still do kind of their own thing, or their more tailored thing. But on the other hand, there's not this also individual attention brought. And so it can be much more elaborate, with individual coaching along the way, addressing maybe personal issues, individual issues, but then also issues of team contribution. What do I need as a member to optimally leverage what I can do and my contribution for the team?
So again, you say so much and my mind goes off in many directions, but something that really popped out really was, in sports, the coach has power. They can make changes. Oftentimes coaches in business only can advise. They don't necessarily, because they're external, and that maybe
they
you
don't.
can correct me if
A real coach doesn't even advise. That's why I made the distinction earlier between me acting as a coach and me acting as a thinking partner. As a thinking partner, I would be much more open than to say, have you considered this? And why don't you think this through? Versus coaching is much more supporting the thought processes through questioning most often, and certain reflective tools and so on of the person, him or herself. Meaning you think that the coachee has the answers, has the capability, the self-determinism to figure things out, and you help them figure it out for themselves. Versus, we are not consultants. We are not, this is one way, do it. But we might say, oh, okay, so you have a limiting belief here. why don't we think about if this is helping you or not? And is this thought that you had really true? We challenge in that way and so on, but we don't really advise. Right, unless in pure coaching you don't advise, otherwise we would be a consultant.
Because then I was thinking about the sports side, because I never played professional football, but if you've got a coach, he can say, right, this person comes off and then someone goes in his place, or they change position on a field based on their strength. So that's when I say power to sort of influence, that's where my mind was thinking. But then when you take that, because why that thought came up is that you were saying, what you would, these things in a company you would say maybe, and then HR go, oh, how can we possibly do that? You can explain stuff, but that ability to move pieces, people into different places, that's where I see a difference.
Right.
Does that make sense?
The big difference is that the coach in the corporate setting does not make decisions. The client makes decisions.
Okay. Yeah.
Right. But we help the client till the ground, figure out what he wants to seed, help him with the determination to keep at it and let the thing grow in order to later harvest. Okay.
Yeah.
But they are deciding. And I think it makes sense if you think about this, because we are not playing a game. We're living life. Our clients live life, and their context is so infinitely more complex than the rules of a game that you play on a field.
Yeah.
Okay. So in let's say a team sports, the coach will be able to pull out players, replace them, give them tactics, because it's such a simple system ultimately, and they're able to play according to certain rules and skill sets. And the coach will know those rules and the skill sets and in this small system. But for a coach, any coach or consultant for that matter, to assume that they know as much as the client or more than the client about the context of their leadership thing or whatever, it would be hubris, I think. They are the expert in their life, and so it's and it would be counterproductive for the coach to provide solutions. They might say, have you considered this, with proper disclaimers, let's say, right? Because sometimes I will say to my clients, listen, this, all that you said, something popped into my mind. With your permission, is it okay if I put it in the room here for you to ponder? That's how I phrase it. Then I might say, maybe this would make sense, or maybe this would be an option. But see, in that sense, it's directive. But on the other sense, I am absolutely not attached to the outcome.
Yeah.
Just because I put that option to float around the room, if they do or don't do, decide or don't decide, that's up to them. I'm not attached to the outcome. Versus, maybe a consultant would be, this is the solution, and now please go implement it, which is very, very different. So, I think that because they know their context, their life, their things, and themselves ultimately the best, it's up to them to make decisions, and it's their life, it's their responsibility. But having somebody with whom they can bounce these ideas forth and back, and that holds the space so they can think, and sometimes even giving this weird implicit permission. I'm not going to say, this is good, do that. I'm not going to hear that, but I'm going to say, does this feel right? If this feels right for you, why don't you, try it?
Yeah, I think that's a very freeing approach for everybody. Like you said, you're not attached necessarily to the outcome. You can see something in the context of the work that you're doing that makes sense. But like you say, in sports, there are rules. It's clear, it's simple. They might change slightly, but everyone knows the rules and you can play within those rules. Whereas business is, it has rules you can't break, like illegal things, but we're not really talking about that. We're about
Mhm.
how to do business better. And that is so wide ranging from the culture, the communication, how your clients, it's almost endless, So
Mhm.
what you're taking is your experience and just floating an idea and seeing how that resonates with them and giving that freedom to go, okay. And then my head says this ego thing again. So, if they're open and enough to kind of go, oh, okay, because I know some would go, why didn't I think of that? And the ego would
Mhm.
get in the way. But having that relationship with a coach, like you said, and for me, like you say, it's like you're a thinking partner. It's not that everything that you say has to be done. It's just you're coming from an outside perspective, giving
Mhm.
freedom and trust, and you know, yeah. And sometimes I've found that the idea that you want to say, you say it, but it's not that idea. It's the thing behind it. You've had to get that thing out of the way in order to get to the really good thing behind. And being around people that like you said, don't care, and that's not care as in they don't want the best for you, but they're not attached to necessarily being right or wrong all the time. It's that exchange of ideas that can be very liberating and freeing to go, oh, okay, yeah, yeah, and that's that exchange of ideas, right?
Right. And because see, you could say, well, why don't these leaders go and talk to their colleagues or whatever? But they very often have an agenda as well.
Mm,
And I don't have an agenda. My agenda, when you're my coachee, is to help you succeed in whatever way that you define success. Right.
yeah.
And very often you do things that I would never in a million years do, or that I, personally would, just see, well, that would not be for me. Right. But if it's for you, all the better. Go and be happy. Right. Uh, yeah, so it's just that in these decisions, see, the options are infinite. Imagine you're a top leader of a company and you have to make some strategic decisions. The solution space or the decision space in there is infinite. You could do any myriad of different decisions, different directions you take the company into, and so on. So it really is. It comes back to getting to the fundamentals, really being clear about what it is that you want, being clear about your requirements, being clear about expectations that are set onto you by yourself, by others, by the company, by your culture, greater sense of culture, and so on. And then trying to address any kind of limiting beliefs that might happen.
Mm,
And you know, if people ask me to, in one sentence, to define coaching, I tend to say that you think things and you say things with a coach there that you wouldn't with the coach not there.
okay.
Okay, it's literally this where our brain would run away from and come up with a million excuses not to think about something, maybe because it's uncomfortable
Mm,
or foreign, or uh, just doesn't agree with us in whatever way, or emotionally charged or conflict laden and things like that. You don't want to go there. With the coach there, you're able to go there. You're able to think it through and address it. It's that kind of presence that we're talking about. And in coaching lingo, we often call that to hold the space,
yeah.
to create this space that for that moment increases your comfort zone,
Yes.
right? Where if it were just you and you by yourself, you would run against this limit of your comfort zone, and you would struggle to go beyond it. And the bubble of the coaching and its relationship will allow you to extend that comfort zone, even just for the moment that you was the coach, but that's okay. It allows you for exploration, for different kind of thinking, for shifts of perspective. And ultimately that will then give you the clarity to put it into practice tomorrow morning.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
I've heard this thing many times about in sort of improving. It's about asking better questions, and again, it comes back to that point when you're doing the day-to-day work. Sometimes you are asking yourself the same questions.
Or
You
none at
might
all.
think, yeah, yeah, but like you can say, oh, how can I do this better? Which is a quite a it might seem on the surface that it's a good question, but if you can ask a much deeper question with just a few extra words, um, and I think as a coach, you can come along, and it's not about being more intelligent. It's just about phrasing things. And I think if you understand the person that you're working with, I think that has such an impact that you can ask in a way that sort of triggers their mind and triggers their thinking. And this goes back to a point you mentioned much earlier on, I think almost in the beginning of our conversation, that, we seem to think coaching is done and dusted in like 3 weeks or something. Even that, and, you mentioned about training. I think there's this confusion between training and coaching sometimes. You go, oh yeah, we gave leadership training. That's not coaching. You need to be you need to see consistently, and to understand the person, and there is this world where we want quick results all of the time. And it's, well, yeah, but for me, and I was one of these people that wanted quick results, but the more I'm in business, I understand it's the long term. If you're more successful, the longer that you're in business. So it might seem that, like you said, the return on investments isn't great in this quarter or this half of the year, or maybe even this year, but the seeds that you're planting, those relationships, may only blossom next year. But that's
Right.
okay. But that takes foresight, and it takes courage, because in any company there's sales, right? And they go, oh, our sales are down, are down, are down. But some of that stuff takes a year, maybe longer, because you're moving people around, you're having to work with new people, get behind the things that maybe people are saying. And that takes a long time, right? It's not one and done.
Right. Maybe here would be a good place to use a kind of businessy term: continuous improvement. Right? I mean, we can make a business case for continuous improvement. It's something that, you do, always striving for this 1% better over time and so on. And we realize that continuous improvement requires a certain sense of continuity in order for it to work. And this is kind of the same thing. I'm so sorry. Somebody is at the door. And so so this continuous improvement just over time, and I really think that there's something to be said about it. I think that looking again at coaching not as this one-time fixing it thing, but as something optimizing what's already working. Optimization is also something that happens continually, of taking something, looking what has changed, then changing it again in order to optimize it. If it works, good. If it doesn't, let's change tactics. The other thing too, and I think athletes do it the same way. Incidentally, they might then say, okay, let's put a little bit more pressure on the left hand and see if that works, and then they try it, and if it doesn't, then they reduce the pressure on the left hand or whatever. So I really think that there's this sense that we need to try certain things and then do it, which brings us again to something also I said earlier, is this idea of supporting the practice. supporting the practice of all this. Training is very much, you go into 2 days of this training, let's say that's, or workshop even, where you even do things in this workshop. And then what happens is you're being let loose on Monday and never heard again. There's no follow-up, there's no accountability, there's nothing. And you're just then supposed to be able to take all these concepts that you learned and so on and apply them and modify them and adjust them over time. So that maybe 6 months down the road, you're actually getting the fruits of your labor from having attended and then implemented these things where you were in this training for 2 days. How often does that happen?
Yeah,
I
exactly.
think that the training paradigm hasn't really proven itself that successful over the last 40, 50 years. Even though there's a place for it, of course, but let's also there again distinguish skills from, more mindset work and alignment work and so on. Versus coaching is also, you decided this thing last week to focus on this one thing. And what did you try? How did it work? Again, this reflection bit before you then again adjust and try this next thing and then reflect again and so on and so on. So continuous improvement, experimentation, but supported, meaning there's somebody there holding you accountable. If maybe you would be, too busy to keep yourself accountable, too distracted, to whatever it might be. And so there's also this sense of practice. And weirdly enough, knowing that in 10 days you're going to have your coaching session will keep you a little bit more accountable today, not to just forget about it or letting it fall to the very bottom of your to-do list. So I think that there's maybe switching to a continuous improvement, performance forward-looking stance rather than seeing coaching purely as a cost center.
Yeah.
Because companies do, HR people do. How much is it going to cost me? That's the first thing that they're asking, instead of saying, is this the right tool for? Because it's one way, right? I mean, we have training, we have mentoring, we have coaching, we have all these kind of things. But is coaching right in this situation for these people? And really making space for allowing them to unfold over time, and the benefits to surface, because there's nothing more thrilling than when you see a team, for instance, finally gel and finally click. And we're not talking little itty bitty percentage points of performance improvement. We are talking magnitudes of performance improvement. And so it's unfortunate that there's still so much left on the table when it comes to corporate coaching.
So this, the sort of spanning this training and coaching. So I remember years ago when I was working in London, you'd sign up for training and you'd go to a training course, like you said, maybe 2 days, and your head's full of all these ideas. Okay, yeah, this is great. And then you go back into the office and no one has any context of what you've gone and trained on. And you go, oh yeah, it's really good. You've got all this motivation to do these, make these changes. And then if you're leading a team, they go, oh God, it's just because he went on training. Like he's just trying to implement something. They didn't come on that journey. And then so the context of that training really made sense outside of the business, but inside the business, it makes no sense to anybody. You're trying to show up as someone who's completely had an epiphany and is going to change everything. Now you've got to convince, let's say you've got a staff of 3, you've got to convince them. All that motivation goes out almost day 2, I would say, like, if not before. So as I was thinking about this, I just sort of wanted to ask you, you obviously work with leaders themselves, but you also work with teams, mediation, etc. Where do you see the biggest shift? Do you see it when you work with someone? So in my head, I always think, most of these people are at the top, and because oftentimes times big change has to come from the top to ripple down. If you try and make a change down here, it can be very successful, but it doesn't really sort of bleed into the rest of the company. It just becomes a standalone. So if you've targeted someone right at the top, they have the power and influence over everybody to almost have the culture change. But if you're trying to change just one person, but if you then change the team, what do you think is the biggest impact, to change one person or to change the team?
I really think that it depends. It really depends. I mean, you might have an R&D team or something like that, and all of a sudden, because of some team coaching, they really start to gel. They become more innovative. They pull all in the same direction, and so on. And that in itself can be such a motivation for change, because see, the culture change comes in the heads of people. It's not something that is a signboard from HR, right? Because we all know, right? And I'm sorry when I'm honking on HR, I'm just using it stereotypically, because things like this often come from so outside, and they seem so foreign to the day to day that people, the worker bees or whatever, or the lower level managers and so on, see it's outside of their realm of influence sometimes even. But I think that it wherever, I think if you set good precedent at whatever level in the company, it's probably going to get to the attention of the right people eventually. Of course, if you have a choice, I mean, which executive coach like myself doesn't dream of working with the big boss and the leadership team and so on? Of course, you want to affect change at scale. That is, at least for me personally, that is where I derive a lot of satisfaction. See, very often what happens is, I struggled a lot of this when I got dual accreditation and all these kind of things. Am I an individual coach that also does team coaching, or am I a team coach that also does individual coaching? And in the end, I decided I would be the coach you need. Yeah. Full stop. Okay. And so very often it is that you start with a leader, and then, oh, shall we not bring the team into these discussions? Or you start with a team, you get brought in for a team engagement, and then it's like, oh, the leader wants a bit more individual guidance or attention or thinking space. Yeah. Okay. And then you do what is needed. You bring this flexibility into it, which is, again, I think, one of the true benefits of this kind of approach versus a canned kind of training, let's say. Yes. And I think in sports, it's the same way. If you have a team, you work with the team, but if you have one player who sets himself apart as this rising leader within the team, you will support him in that. If you have another player who is, maybe having some struggles in some area, you're going to focus in that moment on that player in order to make the whole thing work. And, that only comes through investing care and time and, bringing in the right people. So investing on a financial thing, but I said investing. Yes. It's not a cost. Yeah. It's an investment. It's an investment. And so I think if I had one thing to maybe use on this analogy, an athlete is not going to see the coach as a cost. the athlete's going to see, or the athletic team is always going to see the coaches as a can't do without investment.
It's an asset, not a liability, right?
Right,
It's
right.
so I remember I worked in this company, and they went through this big transformation. It was a global transformation. So I'd worked in projects, and I used to do this waterfall approach of delivering everything. And they changed to a doing things agile. And as I say, it was global. So it was a huge program. And as part of that, they had agile coaches come in. And I think each location had at least one coach. I think maybe the London office had a few because it had a few more people. But ultimately, what I really liked about this is that the the change was happening anyway. It was coming from the top. But the guy that we were assigned, he became a friend. He he would hold these sessions where we were all together, and he would explain things. And so you know, it's almost like he would tackle a lot of the bigger issues. You know, people worried about their jobs, and you know, what position were they going to be in because they were no longer made sense in the new way of doing things. But afterwards, he hung around, and then he would go, "Oh, hi, Colin. Like, how are you?" And he would spend some time um, with me, and it felt like that wasn't a thing he was being paid to do. It was something that he wanted to do, and at first I felt very special because I thought, "Oh, he's just focusing on me." But then I paid attention, and he was doing this with everyone, which I realised that was such a great thing because he was taking the sort of temperature of everybody, where they are, and we had some great conversations. And he would have a breakout session specifically for me. He said, "Yeah, look, let's catch up." And he was busy, like he had a to-do list that was you know, just ever increasing, but he took the time, and we had some very great conversations. We would talk about a lot of things, but again, there was just some wisdom in there that you could take away and go, "Oh, I feel seen, I feel heard. He actually understands who I am," and he applied that coaching to me. Now, that's very rare, and maybe it didn't work as well for other people, but certainly for me, you know, oftentimes people force coaching on people, and you know, you go, "Oh, why do I need this?" And you can be resistant. But in this instance, this guy was really accommodating, very could go up the scale, was very clear on what the end goal was, but he would navigate left and right to to spend time with people and to work through that process wherever you were on that scale. Okay, you absolutely didn't want to change this transformation. Yes, you're halfway, or you want to get there, and the impact of that. But they also had over a year's program. That was one thing that they'd committed to doing, and that was huge value for me. Huge value.
Right.
Yeah. So,
Yeah, I can imagine. And, you know, I think that it's quite uncommon nowadays to have folks really listen and listen without an agenda, in full support and non-judgment. And I think that there's a lot of power in that. And I'm so sorry. Excuse me, guys. Okay. Yes, please. Sorry about that. I got distracted. So, you know, really sitting in this non-judgment, and it is actually kind of at the foundation of this rapport I was talking about earlier, that you have somebody who really listens without this agenda, without being open to whatever might come, and not judging it as good or bad, but just taking it. And you know, in teams, it's the same thing. And even when we look at personalities, there's some people that will not speak out. If you have a couple louder or more extroverted people in the room, there's others that will shy away. And then having somebody without judgment, just, inviting some to maybe tone down a bit and others to come up a little bit, and getting them used to these kind of exchanges, and role playing it for themselves, I think is very, 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 very important. But just being seen, being heard, very, very important. And and then, of course, leaving space for internal exploration and keeping on task. If we are thinking about this one conflict or this one topic that might be uncomfortable or whatever, let's not shy away from thinking about this one thing, discussing this one thing, looking it in the eye, and not leaving this elephant in the room, to mix metaphors, and many of them. But like it's the same then in sports. If there is an athlete who is trying to diminish the pain he or she has in their shoulder, but it shows up in their throw or something like that, the coach is not going to back away, and the coach is going to say, right, there's a pain in the shoulder. Now, what are we going to do about it? And not letting things just go, like having it swept under the rug, but staying on task. And these of course are not muscular or body things, but these are things of mindset, of decision fatigue, of overwhelm, of poor self-confidence, of poor self-concept, of issues of presence, of conflict comfort or conflict avoidance, and so on and so on. There's so much going into this ability to lead and to think openly and freely. So
is always the case. There is so much that I want to talk to you about this. This whole accountability is huge, I think, and in my mind, I think companies try to do too much. They make processes too busy. They try to win too many things and go in too many directions. But I think that's a conversation that we should have on a round two.
Yes,
I'm conscious of the time, so just to close this off, I guess we can both agree that absolutely coaching is essential. It shouldn't be a crisis moment where you call in a coach. It should be interwoven into a company, and seen as an asset, not a liability. There are, I think, companies out there, there are people, that do get it. What do you think? Is there anything that we could do to bring this more public? Is there any way, or is it just, I know with social media, etc., it's a lot easier to sort of show, okay, we're doing this, but also social media hides a lot. We see just everything's great. So is there one way, like if you were to do one thing, is there anything that you would recommend?
The one thing that works is to try it. Somebody who has had a good coaching session, who is a competent coach, they're sold on it. That's just the way it is. So I think giving it a chance, and because unfortunately, like what you said, we have gone not into a stage of ignorance about coaching, but into a state of misinformation about coaching. And that's much more dangerous. If nobody had ever heard about it before, and we would bring up a new topic, the best thing since sliced bread, then people would listen. But now there's so much stuff floating around there that it's really tricky. And you heard that I always said a competent coach.
Yeah.
Because unfortunately, and this would again add, open a can of worms, but make sure that if you look for a coach, that you look for somebody who is trained, who is maybe accredited by one of the big coaching organizations and so on, and not just somebody who read a book over the weekend and then decides to hang out their shingle.
Yeah.
Competent coach, kind of a specialist in their area, and it's well worth the investment.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think I would echo that thought because, I know there's a lot of coaches out there. You only need to go on LinkedIn, and people say that they're a coach, and the reality is, they probably just left their job and they were looking to do something else. I'm sure they're good, but they're not competent. And
Yeah.
I think the same as therapy. You need to find the right therapist. And I know therapy, should have some sort of medical certification, really, if you're dealing with certain issues. But the time, so often people just take the first thing that comes. But I think that investment in finding the right coach, yes, it might feel a bit painful at first, but once you've got that right person on board, like, they're going to move mountains. It might not move mountains within a week, but it's going to move mountains, and that's what you want. So I think, again, investing in that in the long term, and having that relationship is, for me, is super important.
Yeah, and it's the thing in the world that I enjoy the most, to be in that kind of working relationship with my coachees and my team. So, I wish for everybody to find a coach that works for them, and to give this a real try and see what kind of fruits it's gonna bring for them. So.
Fantastic. Good.
From good to
So,
great to extraordinary.
yeah,
Let's do it. Yeah.
love that. Love that. Right. So again, you and I could talk for hours on end. So I will call it now. But for people, when they hear this, I would absolutely think they'll want to get in contact with you for sure. So where's the best place to find you? I know you're on LinkedIn. That's how we
Yeah,
actually
LinkedIn.
connected.
LinkedIn is a good place to find me. It's just Claudia Cimenti, and I will definitely get in touch in that case.
Good. And I know you're very active in the networking scene in Luxembourg for sure. So people.
Yes, absolutely. And if you're ever in the Luxembourg Mosella region, ping me, and we can at least meet up for a coffee or a cup of crément.
Oh, nice. There we go. That's
There
an
we
invite no
go.
one can refuse, right?
Exactly. Okay,
Fantastic.
Colin, it was really great. I enjoyed this so much. Let's plan on a couple more of these. I would be thrilled.
Yeah, for me too. So thank you very much for your time. I appreciate you, all your wisdom, all your knowledge and experience. So thank you so much, Claudia.
Thank you.
All
Bye
right.
bye.
Take care. Bye.